Good morning. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. Hello, Zoom friends. We are glad you're with us today. My name is Heidi Gould. My pronouns are she, her. I have short, wet, silverish hair, and I wear glasses, and I'm wearing a turquoise dress with a Worship Associates bright batiqued stole today. And I am this morning's worship associate. All the information you need to know about today's service can be found in our handy guide to Sunday worship. If you didn't get one and need one, you can raise your hand. I know Liz may have a few, and in the back they may have a few. If you just raise your hand, let us know you need a handy guide to Sunday service. Zoom friends, our tech team will drop a copy of the order of service and a visitor form in the chat. I am so pleased today to welcome the Reverend Ryu McAllister, as she and Rev Jen have swapped pulpits for today. Reverend McAllister has served the UU congregation in Corvallis for 17 years in 2 different stints, but yes. In between, she served a congregation in Kalamazoo for 15 years, my home state in Michigan. Many years ago, she did her ministerial internship with this congregation and also preached a candidating sermon here 11 years ago. In addition to a long career in UU ministry, more than 30 years, she's not that old though. She has served on many community boards, helped create and staff the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists, and teaches in the Religious Studies Department at Oregon State University. Here we have gathered in this circle of kinship, whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we are so very glad you are here and you are right where you belong. And now let us prepare our hearts and minds as we enter a time of worship. We are going to light the chalice medley. If you would please come up and light the chalice. I appreciate it. Such a great and wonderful volunteer who's invaluable to our congregation. We'll light the chalice as I share the words from Eric Hepburn. He's a pulpiteer from the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Georgetown, Texas. We light this flame to remind us love is the center. As we grow and connect, mature and deepen, love remains the center. When the light of truth burns all else away, love remains. Blessed be. And now, let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world.
Well, first, thank you so much for the beautiful welcomes. Everyone who has spoken to me has been incredibly welcoming, and I'm very glad to be here again. I'm very familiar with this congregation, having really begun my ministerial career with this congregation more than 30 years ago. So thank you for that. And such a pleasure to be able to hear both piano and organ this morning. What a gift. I have a couple of readings I want to share with you because I'm going to be looking at a little bit more about what we mean when we say love, because we're talking a lot about it, and it's not just something simplistic. So the first reading is from a retired Methodist minister. His name is Steve Garnis Holmes. He writes a prayer and publishes every day. Sometimes I have no idea what he's talking about, but sometimes it's just right there. So of course he's writing from the Christian perspective. So this is one of his poems. The perspective of sin is hierarchical. Everything is of relative power and authority. Every action, every person, every moment ranked. Every truth proven by a stone-carved law, every life measured on a scale. But in real life, there are no ranks. There is no proof, no authority. The first is last, the last first. Everything is a sign of everything, and everything shines. There is only love doing its best, and fear getting in the way. Love is the only sign, the only authority, the only power. Everything else is an illusion. Tyrants threaten, laws dictate, styles prescribe, fears control. Ignore them. Love alone is your badge, your guide, your power. The second reading comes from a fabulous conversation that I've been reading a report of for months between two young, I'm going to say young because they're younger than me, young philosopher theologians, one of whom is Rabbi Nate DeGroot. He's the associate director of the Shalom Center. He's working with Rabbi Arthur Wasco, who started that center in Philadelphia long ago. Arthur Wasco, one of the teachers I listen to a lot, he's in his mid-80s now. Nate DeGroot beginning to move that work into a new generation. And Nate DeGroot in this conversation is speaking with Bayo Akomolafe, a Nigerian-born philosopher theologian who is now working in the entire world. He lectures at the Pacifica Institute of Graduate Studies in California. But between them, they are in the style of philosophers and theologians, trying to describe the world the way it is now in ways that we can try to understand it. And I find there, so just so you know, the title of this conversation that I read is this: An Invitation to Shapeshift, a Talmudo-poetic conversation on post-activism. I'll just say that one more time, just in case. An invitation to shapeshift, a Talmudo-poetic conversation on post-activism. This is how philosophers and theologians speak. I gave this to my 40-year-old son to read because I thought he would like it. He's like, whoa, there are a lot of big words in here I don't understand. That's what philosophers do. Anyway, here's one part of that conversation. It's a story that Nate DeGroot told about waves, part of the Jewish tradition. There was a big wave and a little wave, and they are bobbing along in the ocean, making their way to shore, when the big wave glimpses the shore in the distance and sees all the other waves crashing onto the shore and dissolving back into the water. The little wave looks up and sees the fear in the big wave's eyes and asks, "What's wrong?" So the big wave turns to the little wave and explains that we're heading towards our demise, to crash on the shore. And in that moment, the little wave turns to the big wave and says, "You know, we're not just waves, we're water. We are part of a larger whole. We're not these individual waves, we are water." This is the idea, DeGroot says, of the divinity within and around all things, which is the core credo of Judaism, as I understand it. Let me introduce myself a little bit more. Jill McAllister, I use she, her pronouns. I'm an older white woman. I'm wearing a red caftan with camels on it that my granddaughter loves very much, and some white pants. I have sort of gray hair. I cannot preach unless I move. Therefore, I have to move away from the pulpit. So I want to give some background to what I want to talk about, because I'm thinking, as maybe you are, about this change we've gone through in UUism recently, in which we adopted as the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association some new wording about our values. And what we called the principles and purposes, our sources and purposes, has changed slightly to a new statement of values. And it starts by saying, love is at the center. And oh my goodness, we had to fight about that. What? Love at the center? What about our purposes and principles, which we love, 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 love? Why would we put love at the center? I was like, wow, that's interesting. Which sort of means that people don't like things to change. But to put love at the center is a big, big challenge, because we know we're not talking about love as sentimentality. And so we need to begin to understand what we mean when we say that, otherwise it becomes really simplistic and shallow. So what I want to talk about a little bit is what I call the spiritual life, but it's rooted in the religious life. And I know that it's popular and has been for a long time to say, well, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And because I study and teach religious studies, I think, well, that is just simplistic. Upgrade your understanding of what religion is. So I'll give you my definition of religion to begin with. And I come up with this definition from studying religious traditions of the world for more than 30 years. And when I teach in a class, I say to my students, because they have definitions, and almost all of them, unless they're kind of conservative, they do not claim to be religious, but they claim to be spiritual. So for me, religion, this is a working definition, and it's been working for more than 25 years. Religion is a human process. It's something that we are involved in. It is intrinsic to being human. It is a human process of trying to understand the nature of our relatedness. As in, what is this? What am I part of? What am I supposed to do? How does this all work? Where did I come from? How did I get here? The nature of our relatedness. What am I in? And that question is always, always there. So over thousands of years, human beings, that question just can't help itself. It asks itself all the time. And so human communities, because we have such a deep need to have answers, we've come up with answers. Well, we are the humans, and there's a God, and there are worms, and blah, blah, and we fit here. And all of these things that human communities do, which become the traditions that are passed on, are answers, but they're just answers that human beings have given. Who am I in relation to? The question is always asking itself in us, even though most of us do not ever sit down on any given Sunday or Tuesday afternoon and ask these questions. Who am I in relation to myself? Who am I in relation to others? Who am I in relation to all of this? Yet those questions are guiding us. So just a quick little try down, who am I in relation to myself is the entire field of psychology. What does it mean to be me? What's the authentic me? What's real? What's true? How to be honest? Oh, that one's enough to work on for the rest of our lives. And we are. Who am I in relation to? Everything else? All people, all living things. What am I allowed to do? Can I just walk up to anybody, and if I don't like them, can I punch them? Can I walk up to them, and if I like them, can I just give them a kiss? Who says what I can do? The entire field of ethics. Who am I in relation to everything else? And who am I in relation to life itself, life with a capital L? You can call it the universe, the cosmos, whatever is the biggest thing you can imagine. Say ultimate reality, who am I a part of that? Like, where did I come from? Where am I going? These things are just always working. So we're in that. I say that if you are human, you're able to think and feel. You cannot not be in this process, which I call religion. Who am I? the nature of our relatedness. Spirituality, according to this definition, is what we do to try to nurture the integrity of those relations. How to be more honest? What do I have to do that? What do I have to practice to become more honest? Who am I in relation to others? What do I have to do in order to be more kind? How much practice does that take? Like, just saying, I'm kind is not the answer. Like thinking, I know I'm kind, because it gets proven over and over and over in relation to others. No matter what you think, like, I'm a good person, I'm nice, I'm kind. You have to ask everybody else you've interacted with to see if that's true. And you know, if you have teenagers and other people in your family, they'll quickly tell you, oh no. I have one, my youngest, who's 28 now. When he went to college, we had some conversations. He said, you know, Mama, you were always yelling at me. And I said, I kind of remember raising my voice maybe 3 times to you in your life. It turns out, whenever I got firm, I would say, Calvin, but for him, that was yelling, right? So we can't understand our relations with others unless we ask everybody else. All right, so spirituality is, what do we do to nurture the integrity or the wholeness of those relations? All right, so that's the background for talking about the spiritual life. So we live our lives in the midst of everything that's going on. So now, for example, you know, it feels chaotic. Like things are just falling apart. Stuff that many of us thought were like, you could count on this, the way the world, you could count on American democracy. You could count on people being relatively reasonable. You could count on at least the earth was going to keep going. It feels a little chaotic right now. So that's actually always been true for human beings. There's always been chaos in the world. There's always been destruction. There's always been things to be afraid of. No human communities have ever escaped that. I think one of the things that's hardest for us as these modern American people, mostly the modern American white suburban people, we came to expect that things were okay. Like the pinnacle of human development. We got to where it's okay and it should stay that way. Well, we were, you know, wrong about that. So the spiritual life is what we do to live in the way things are, to live well in the way things are. I've said before that it's cultivating inner steadiness and inner nobility. Inner steadiness is not like not able to be moved. Like inner steadiness is the opposite of not able to be moved. It's the ability to move and balance as things happen, right? Sometimes it's the 3 points of contact thing. If you have 3 points of contact, you can hold on a little bit better. Inner steadiness and nobility, I would say that inner nobility is to understand what we say our values are, like love is one of our big values, and actually be able to enact that, embody that. There's a difference between what we think and how we live in the world. In fact, there are big gaps between what we think about ourselves, others, and how we live in the world. And that's why an inner life, the spiritual life, the work we do to nurture the integrity of the relationships is necessary, because there are huge gaps between who we think we are, who we say we are, who we hope we are, and who we are, especially when stuff happens. I had conversations with my mother, who was a lifelong Methodist, but not really into theology. I mean, we were part of the Methodist Church because it was a beautiful community. But I I left that faith. I mean, the music was fantastic growing up. There was always an organ. But I didn't understand what they were talking about from the pulpit since I was about 6. Like, what are they talking about? Jesus, like people in sandals, beards? Like, I don't see that happening around here. Anyway, I asked my mother later when I was, thinking about things like the resurrection, all that, I said, do you really believe in that stuff? And she said, yes. I'm like, why do you? And she didn't have an answer. She just said, because you have to. I said, no, you do not have to. But she wasn't interested in asking those questions. Some people can't help asking the questions. Why are things the way they are? How shall I live? How are we going to do this? So if the inner life, the spiritual life was ever needed, it is really needed now. Because we are having to give up a lot of what we thought was going to be the way it is, or that we thought we deserved. Why did any of us think we deserved the world to be some way for us instead of the way it is? The ego does fascinating things. I have a sign in my office. It's behind me, but I look at it when I go in. It's there on Zoom. It says, don't believe everything you think. It's a very good Buddhist teaching. Because you think it does not necessarily mean that it's the truth of the world. I'm going to say that 99% of the time. Because you think it is not the truth of the world. It is your ego doing its job. The Buddha said, what he basically taught, learn to understand what your mind is doing. Learn to understand what it is doing to you. Meditation, learning to understand your mind. Very important form of spiritual practice. So here we are in the world which feels chaotic, which is chaotic in many ways. Things seem to be disintegrating. Certainly things are changing. Some things are breaking. New things are being born. We don't know. And the world feels unintelligible to many of us. We feel like we're losing it because we had some answers. And we need answers. That's what our minds do. Okay. I do this. I do this more often these days. Okay, world, just slow down just a little bit. Just slow down a little bit. Let's not have a major political change every single week. Just slow down a little bit, and if I can slow down and think enough, I'm going to come to a new answer. Because that's what our mind is doing. So Bayo Akomolafe, this Nigerian-born philosopher, and Nate DeGroove had this conversation in which they began with a Jewish understanding called teku, which is related to a Yoruban, or the Nigerian indigenous tradition, an idea called mbari, both of which mean conversations which have no resolution. Teku is to be willing to be in a place, to hear all of the ideas and the conversation and even the arguments, and then to be able to go away or be still with no resolution. Because there may not be a resolution, even between different human minds, there may not be a resolution which is adequate for the way things are. There are not simple answers. The world, our minds, our bodies are not only complicated, but incredibly complex. I mean, you're probably reading this stuff too. Maybe more than half of what we think or how we feel is because of the billions of microbes in our guts, which we haven't even begun to get to know or try to understand or trust. We've been thinking all this time that because we think something, then we're pretty sure that it's true. Meanwhile, these microbes have been living us forever. So we arrive at a place where what we're faced with is the need to learn to not need to have an answer for everything. And that in itself feels like instability. 3 points of contact helps grab onto something. This is an incredible practice to have to do, to stop oneself from needing an answer, to stop oneself from trying to tell other people what the answer should be for them. You know, we do it when we engage in, we talk about the other political party. We talk about those people. Their idea is stupid, which means my idea is better. Why do we say those kinds of things? Teiku. When a debate can't be solved, when multiple sides have presented their viewpoints and there's no resolution, it means let it be. Let the inquiry stand or be without resolution. They said in this conversation, this is a kind of a pregnant pause or a pause full of potential necessitated by disputes that won't find resolution on this side of eternity. Oh, well, that's challenging for us because we don't like to think about eternity or something that's that much bigger than us, even though we are not just waves, we are the water. Nothing is dying. The crashing is part of the movement of the water. We are in it. There isn't an answer for the wave. Beo Akomalafi said in this conversation that this idea of teiku, of this pause, of this not being able, not needing to have an answer, is to understand that what we think counts doesn't necessarily. That's what our mind is doing. But what about this? What about this? And you have to have this, and they have to say this, and they have to act like this. About like all the things we think counts. He calls it countability. Who says? Who says? Okay, so I'm watching my 5-year-old granddaughter. She lives in 2 houses, one with her mom, one with her papa. At her mom's house, she's, coiffed and cleaned up. And when she lives with her papa, sometimes with us, she's a little urchin. She wears, she's dirty and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, And then I'm like, wait a minute. Who cares? Who says that counts? That she looks a certain way, right? We have all of those things. Where do we get that idea of what is countability? Just because we can name it and count it doesn't mean it's necessarily reducible to our terms of reference. And our terms of reference are biased and limited because our brains are limited. Because every human brain thinks it is the center of the universe, like every other one of the billions of brains that thinks it's the center of the universe. And all of them are just little organs and cells within the whole universe. We, as part of spiritual practice, have to learn to stop thinking we will think it through. In the Hindu tradition, there are 4 main ways of being in the world, human ways. They're actually the basis of yoga. They're the basis of Carl Jung's personality types, if you ever did the Myers-Briggs. They include Jnana Yoga, which is the intellectual way, people who think their way through everything. It's the shortest but the steepest, like Albert Einstein is probably one example, and none of the rest of us ever come close. There's the bhakti way, which is to approach everything with sentiment, with emotion. It's the way of love. Like you respond to, the sink is going off. The person with the intellectual way of doing it, if the faucet is broken and there's water going everywhere, the intellectual person will say, look at that, water everywhere. Where's the guidebook? Where's the fix-it book? Let me Google that and figure that out. The person who's into the emotional way is like, there's water everywhere. What do I do? There are different ways of doing things, right? So we have to take care to recognize that simply because our minds do things certain ways is not the end all and be all of how to be in the world. So what we have in what feels like chaos is at the very least an invitation to understand love more. What if love is the fact of being alive, the fact of having been given life, the fact of having been given this life, the fact that we are being breathed moment by moment. That is a gift. None of us is doing that. We are part of the universe that the universe is living through, and we know that because in every moment, including now, we are being breathed. And we cannot think our way to that. And no matter how we assess it, like, I'm not being breathed well enough. I want more breath. I want a better breath. I mean, we do that when our bodies change, right? Right? We do that. We analyze it. Instead of, oh, good heavens, it's there. It's there. I'm alive. It's there. Imagine if love is this aliveness given by the universe. Call that love. Call the gift of being in this, call that love. We are situated in love, aliveness, givenness, giftedness. We are part of the presence of love in every given breath. Call it justice, call it mutuality, call it equity, call it trust, call it togetherness, call it unity, call it connectedness. What is the source of our ability to be in the world as fully as possible? That's the invitation that life gives us. That's the invitation to the spiritual life, to live in, to recognize that source. There's another way to look at it. For years, I've been reading an essay by an indigenous woman. She was an Apache teacher, philosopher. Her name was Paula Gunn Allen. I recommend her writings to you. A couple of the books, Beacon Press published one called Grandmothers of the Light. She also wrote an incredible biography of Pocahontas, which I learned on. Anyway, this essay, which I read over and over again, was titled, "The Woman I Love is a Planet, the Planet I Love is a Tree." Don't try to analyze it. In which she basically said, everything feels like it's falling apart, there's tribulation, this and that, falling apart, but guess what? It's not about you. The earth, she is becoming who she is becoming in the universe. She is evolving, she is growing, she is going to become who she is because she's not finished yet. And if you feel the trials and tribulations of her labor and her growth, it's because you are part of her. Celebrate that you are in this process, this cosmic process of the earth becoming what she is becoming. Of course we feel it, but it is not about us. Say that love is the ability to stay present to the way things are. Say that love is the ability to not say, this is chaos. Say that love is the ability to say, oh, it's all moving. It's all changing. So between love and chaos, it's not a between. If we are beloved of the universe, if each of us is beloved of the universe already, it is all a gift. And we are learning, and we are part of the growth, the movement, the evolution of the universe. Let me finish with a beautiful little piece from a C.S. Lewis in an essay called The Four Loves. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with your hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, dark, safe, motionless, airless, it will change. It will be not broken. It will become unbreakable, unpenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. May we stay in it together. May it be so.
And if we can say together our closing words as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be.